John had always been an adventurer, someone who craved the unknown. That's why, when he discovered the uncharted planet on his maps, he couldn't resist. The planet had been marked with a strange symbol, one that no explorer had dared to decode, and the small island that appeared on his screen had been the subject of many rumors. It was isolated, far away from the busy space lanes, and no one seemed to know much about it. But to John, this was the perfect place to explore. He set his course, leaving behind the busy spaceports and ships full of travelers. As he approached the planet, the atmosphere shimmered, like a fog that refused to let him through. For a moment, he considered turning back, but his curiosity pushed him onward. The planet was beautiful in its own strange way, with towering mountains and oceans of shimmering blue. But there was something eerie about it, like it was waiting for him. John landed his ship on the island without any problems. It was a small speck of land, barely big enough to fit his ship. The sand was white, almost like it had been untouched for years. The trees were tall and twisted, their branches reaching out like fingers trying to grab something. The air smelled salty, but also sweet, like something sweet and alien was drifting in the wind. He stepped off his ship and immediately felt a chill run down his spine. The island was silent, too silent. There were no birds, no animals, not even the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. It was as if the whole place had been frozen in time, and yet something about it felt alive, as if the land itself was watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. John checked his equipment, his heart beating a little faster. He didn't know why, but something told him that this place was far from normal. The energy in the air seemed thick, almost like it had been charged with something powerful, but he couldn't place what it was. He began walking inland, his boots sinking slightly into the soft sand. His eyes darted to the surrounding trees, trying to find any signs of life. But nothing moved. No animal, no human, just the soft whisper of the wind. As he walked further into the jungle, a strange feeling grew in him. It was as though he was no longer just exploring the island, but something much deeper, something hidden within it. After what seemed like hours of wandering, John stumbled upon something that stopped him dead in his tracks. Ahead of him, partially obscured by trees and dense foliage, stood a figure. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, a mirage maybe. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw her clearly. A woman. She was standing still, as if waiting for him. Her long hair was wild and free, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. Her clothes were strange, light, flowing fabric that shimmered in the dim sunlight. She wasn't dressed like any human he had ever seen. Her skin had a soft glow to it, like it was made of moonlight, and her eyes were the color of liquid silver, sparkling with an intensity he couldn't quite explain. John froze, unsure of what to do. He had been on many planets before, and he had seen his fair share of strange beings, but this was something entirely different. There was no doubt in his mind that she was not human. She seemed to be watching him, her eyes never leaving his face. He felt a sudden urge to walk towards her, an inexplicable pull, as if the very ground beneath his feet was guiding him in her direction. "Hello," John called out, his voice surprisingly loud in the thick silence of the island. He didn't know why he felt so compelled to speak, but it was like the island itself had taken away his ability to stay quiet. The woman didn't respond. She simply tilted her head slightly, her gaze locked onto his. Her silence was unnerving, more unsettling than any alien he had encountered before. She wasn't threatening, but she wasn't inviting either. She was just there, a presence. John took a cautious step forward, his breath catching in his throat. His mind raced, but the words wouldn't come. Who was she? Why was she on this deserted island? What was she waiting for? The air around them seemed to grow thicker, charged with something he couldn't quite understand. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And then, without warning, she spoke. "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was soft, yet it carried an authority that made John freeze in place. There was no fear in her voice, only a strange sadness, as if she knew something he didn't, as if she had been expecting him. John opened his mouth to speak, but his words caught in his throat. Why? Why shouldn't I be here? Her silver eyes narrowed slightly. This island is not what it seems. It is not a place for people like you. John's heart started to race. What did she mean by that? He had no idea, but it was clear that whatever was going on here, this woman was at the center of it. The silence grew again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just the island that felt still. It was everything. The trees, the wind, the very air around them seemed to be waiting for something. Something big. John's curiosity overwhelmed any sense of caution. He took another step forward. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice shaky. The woman's gaze deepened, and a single word escaped her lips. "A prison." John stood frozen, trying to process the alien woman's cryptic words. "A prison," he muttered, the word echoing in his mind. He scanned the strange island around him, still unsure of what was happening. The air felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing down on him. Every instinct told him to turn around and leave, but something in the woman's eyes kept him rooted in place. There was a sadness in them, a deep, ancient sorrow that seemed to hold him captive, as if her gaze alone could unravel him. She took a step closer, her movements graceful yet deliberate. The soft glow of her skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the island, almost as if she were not entirely bound to this world. Her presence was magnetic, drawing him in like a force he couldn't resist. "This place was never meant for you," she said again, her voice low and filled with a strange weight. "You're not supposed to be here. You've disturbed something ancient, something that should have stayed buried." John's heart pounded in his chest. "What do you mean? Who are you?" His voice was shaking now, uncertainty creeping into his words. "Why are you here, alone?" The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked away for a moment, her gaze drifting towards the dense jungle that surrounded them. It was as if she were searching for something, trying to decide whether to share the truth with him. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, like a secret only meant for him to hear. "I am the last of my kind, a prisoner to this island. The others, they have long since disappeared, or perhaps they were lost. This island is my sentence, and now, by your presence, you've awakened something." John felt the ground shift beneath him, as if the island itself had heard her words and responded. The earth trembled lightly, and a sudden chill swept through the air, making his skin crawl. He reached out instinctively, grabbing a nearby rock to steady himself. "What did I wake up?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of fear. "The curse," she whispered. "The island is not just a prison for me. It is a prison for a darkness, an entity older than time itself. And you, by coming here, have broken the seal that held it away." John's stomach churned as he tried to comprehend her words. He had come here for adventure, for discovery. He never expected to find this. An alien woman, a cursed island, and now something far darker. "What happens now?" he asked, dreading the answer. She didn't hesitate. "Now we're both trapped, and it will hunt us." The weight of her words hung in the air, suffocating him. John looked around, as if expecting to see some shadowy form creeping out of the jungle. He didn't know if he believed her fully, but her fear was real. He could see it in the way her eyes darted to the trees, her hands trembling slightly. "This island," she continued, her voice growing softer, "it was meant to keep the darkness contained, but I wasn't supposed to be the one here alone. The others who came before me, they were meant to guard it. But they failed, and now the island has chosen you." The silence that followed felt even more oppressive, like the world had stopped moving, and everything was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. John looked around, his senses on high alert. He couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, but something in the air felt wrong. The trees, the sky, the ground beneath him, they all seemed to be waiting for a signal. "Who are you really?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you here? What's your role in all this?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Instead, she looked at him with a kind of resignation. "I was chosen long ago," she said quietly. "Chosen to keep the darkness sealed. But now that it's free, I can't do it alone. And I can't run. You're my only chance, and I'm afraid that might be your death sentence too." John's mind raced. How had he gotten into this situation? He was an explorer, not a hero, not someone who was meant to fight evil forces or save anyone. But looking at the woman in front of him, knowing that she was as trapped as he was, something inside him stirred. Maybe it was the sheer gravity of the situation, or maybe it was the desire to help someone in need. But he knew he couldn't leave her here alone to face whatever was coming. "What do we do?" he asked, more to himself than to her. The woman glanced at him, her silver eyes softening, though the weight of her words still lingered. "We survive," she said, "and pray we can stop what's been unleashed before it consumes us both." The air thickened once again, and John felt a chill run down his spine. There was no going back now. Whatever this place was, whatever had been unleashed, he was in it for the long haul. And the island, once a peaceful enigma, had now become a ticking time bomb, with no way of knowing when the danger would finally find them. But John had a strange growing sense that whatever came next would change everything. The island seemed to close in on them as the woman's words settled in. The forest felt more alive now, not with the sounds of birds or animals, but with an oppressive silence that hung in the air. John couldn't shake the feeling that the very land around him was waiting for something to happen, something terrible. He stood there, unable to tear his eyes away from the woman, whose silver eyes never left his. Her earlier fear was still present, though now there was something else in her gaze, a deep, unspoken sadness. "Can't we just leave?" John asked, his voice desperate as he glanced back toward the beach, where his ship sat. He knew it was a foolish question. Leaving would be impossible now, not with whatever had been awakened. The island was no longer just a peaceful stretch of land. It was part of something much bigger, darker, and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "I told you," she said quietly. "It's not that simple. Once the seal is broken, there's no leaving until it's done." John swallowed hard. What exactly is this? Darkness? What are we dealing with? She took a deep breath, then turned and began walking away from him, deeper into the jungle. John hesitated for only a moment before following. She led him to the edge of a dense thicket, where the trees grew thick and twisted, their branches interlacing like the fingers of some great, unseen beast. Her pace quickened, and John had to match her stride, though he still didn't fully understand what he was walking into. "The darkness is a creature," she began, her voice low, "but not in the way you think. It's not a monster that you can fight with weapons. It's a force, a corruption. It feeds on fear, on chaos, and on the power of those who try to resist it. It's been imprisoned here for millennia, locked away in the depths of the island. And I was part of the barrier that kept it at bay. But when you arrived, the seal weakened, and it started to wake up." John couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So you're telling me that this whole island was a prison for something that could destroy everything?" She nodded, her expression grim. "That's exactly what I'm saying. This island was chosen long ago as a holding place. It was built by an ancient civilization who understood the true nature of the creature. But time passed, and eventually, those who knew the secret disappeared. I was left to guard it, alone, waiting for something or someone to break the seal." He looked at her, confusion and disbelief written all over his face. "But why were you chosen to stay here alone? You don't even look like you belong on this planet. You're different." The woman's expression hardened, and for a moment, it was as if a mask had fallen over her face, hiding whatever emotions were underneath. "I am different," she admitted, because I was created for this purpose. I'm not from this world. I am the last of my kind, designed to be the guardian of this prison. My race is gone. I am the only one left." Her words hung heavy in the air as they walked deeper into the jungle, the path growing narrower as they entered an ancient part of the island. The trees here were even older, their gnarled roots stretching out of the ground like massive veins, entwining around large, smooth stones. There was something unsettling about the place, like it was ancient beyond comprehension. As they moved, John noticed markings on the stones, strange symbols carved into the rock. They seemed to pulse faintly, as though alive. "What are these markings?" John asked, running his fingers over one of the stones. The symbols felt warm to the touch, almost like they were resonating with some kind of energy. "They are part of the seal," she said, her voice quieter now. "They were carved by the people who imprisoned the darkness. They're meant to bind it, to keep it trapped in its prison. But they're weakening. The creature is powerful. The longer it stays free, the more it can feed on the land, and on us." John felt a shiver run down his spine. It was like he could feel the power of whatever was trapped here, pulsing in the ground beneath him. The whole island felt alive with a dark energy, and it was getting stronger. "So, what happens now?" John asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How do we stop it?" The woman stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression serious. "I don't know," she said, her voice filled with regret. "The power of the seal is fading. I can feel it every day. If the darkness fully wakes up, it will consume everything. There's only one way to stop it, but it's something no one has ever dared to try. We must find the source of the seal's power and restore it, before it's too late." John's mind raced as he processed her words. "But how do we find it? How do we fix something this powerful?" She met his gaze with a determined look. "We don't have a choice. The island holds the key. Somewhere, deep within the heart of it, there's a place where the seal's power is anchored. But it's not easy to get to. We'll need to face whatever the island has become, and whatever is waiting for us." John wasn't sure he was ready for whatever lay ahead, but looking at the woman and seeing the genuine fear in her eyes, he knew he couldn't walk away. This island had changed him, had pulled him into its web, and there was no turning back now. The real question was, would they be able to stop the darkness before it consumed everything they knew? They pressed deeper into the island's heart. The air grew thicker, heavy with the weight of something ancient. Every step felt like they were walking deeper into a nightmare, no longer just a remote island with strange secrets, but a place where the very laws of nature seemed to be warped. John could feel it. The subtle pull of the island's energy, a quiet hum beneath his feet that seemed to beckon him forward, like a distant call from something buried long ago. The trees here were different. They grew in twisted spirals, their bark blackened, as if scorched by some unseen fire. The ground beneath them had taken on a strange sheen, slick with some kind of dark, oily substance that shimmered in the dim light. It wasn't natural. Nothing here felt natural. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air was thick with the scent of decay, of something that had been dead for a long time, but was now coming to life again. John couldn't help but glance around nervously, his instincts screaming at him to turn back, to escape the madness before it consumed him. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when he knew that whatever this place was, it had already claimed him. His fate was tied to this island, and to the woman walking beside him, whose presence seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. She had been quiet since they started walking again. Her eyes were focused ahead, her steps deliberate, but John could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched every now and then as if she were on edge. He wondered how much of what she said was true, how much of the island's dark power was real. Her fear was tangible, and John didn't know if it was because of the creature she spoke of, or because of something worse. Maybe she was more connected to this place than she let on. "You're wondering if I'm telling you the truth," she said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence like a sharp knife. "You're wondering if the island really holds something dark, something dangerous. But I can't answer that. All I know is what I've felt, what I've seen. And I've seen things here, things no one should ever have to see." John looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her voice. She was no longer just a mysterious alien woman. She was someone with a story, someone trapped by forces beyond her control. "You don't have to explain," he said softly, though his heart was pounding. "I believe you. I need to understand. What exactly is the source of the seal? Where do we find it?" She took a deep breath, turning away from him for a moment, staring ahead at the twisted path that lay before them. "It's not a place, John. It's a being. The seal, the barrier, is a living thing, a creature made of pure energy. It was created by the ancient ones who built this place to imprison the darkness. But the creature, it has a will of its own. It feeds off of the fear, the despair, the energy of those who seek to destroy the darkness. It's part of the prison, and it's the only thing keeping the creature at bay." John's mind reeled at the complexity of it all. A living seal, a creature made of energy. He couldn't fathom what kind of being could create such a thing, or what kind of force could exist beyond the island's borders. "So we need to destroy it?" he asked, his voice uncertain. She shook her head, a sad look crossing her features. "No, John, we can't destroy it. The creature is the key. If we destroy the seal, we break the only thing keeping the darkness contained. We need to find a way to strengthen the seal, to restore it, but we can't do it alone." John felt a pang of frustration. They were running out of time, and all they had were vague answers and riddles. How could they restore something so powerful, so ancient, without understanding it fully? And how would they even find the creature that had become the island's prison? He glanced around at the dense, overgrown jungle, at the strange symbols carved into the trees, and realized that they were still only scratching the surface of whatever lay hidden on this island. "This place," he muttered, "it feels alive. It's like it's waiting for us." The woman nodded. "It is. The island itself is a part of the prison. But as the darkness grows stronger, it warps everything. The land, the creatures, the very air we breathe. It feeds off the fear and desperation of those trapped here, like a living, breathing organism. And it's been waiting for someone to come, someone who can break the cycle." John couldn't stop himself from glancing nervously over his shoulder. The island felt suffocating now, as though it were closing in on them. He was starting to wonder if they would even make it out alive, or if they were walking into the heart of the storm with no way to escape. He swallowed hard, trying to push the doubt from his mind. "Then what do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside him. The woman paused for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer, tinged with sorrow. "We go deeper. We find the source of the darkness and restore the seal before it's too late. If we fail, we will be the last to see the light of day." Her words hit John like a punch to the gut. The stakes were higher than he had realized. There was no going back now. If they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for them, but for everything. The darkness would spread, and there would be no place safe. They moved forward in silence, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on their shoulders. The path ahead grew steeper, the air colder, as if they were nearing the core of the island's power. John had never felt more uncertain in his life, but he couldn't turn back. Not now. Whatever this island was, whatever secrets it held, he was in it for the long haul. And the only thing that mattered now was stopping the darkness before it consumed everything. The deeper they went, the more the island seemed to whisper to them, its ancient power stirring in the shadows. And John couldn't help but wonder if they were walking straight into the heart of an evil that was older than time itself. The deeper they ventured, the more unsettling the island became. Every step felt as though the ground itself was shifting beneath them, twisting to draw them into its ancient, cursed heart. John's mind raced. What exactly had he gotten himself into? The woman at his side, despite her otherworldly appearance and quiet demeanor, seemed as much a prisoner of this place as he was. She walked with purpose, her eyes constantly scanning the surrounding jungle, wary of something that wasn't yet visible. Whatever force controlled this island, it had no intention of letting them leave easily. They reached a clearing, and for the first time, John saw the sky above them. It was thick with dark clouds, swirling in unnatural patterns, almost as if a storm were brewing, though no winds touched the ground. The stillness was unnerving, like the calm before a storm, but John felt a different kind of weight pressing down on him now. This place, this island, was alive with secrets, and he had only scratched the surface. In the center of the clearing stood an enormous stone structure, its edges cracked and weathered, covered in moss and ancient symbols. The air felt thick here, electric, and John could almost hear a faint hum in the distance. It wasn't the wind. It was something more profound, something older than human comprehension. The woman, sensing his confusion, spoke up. "This is it, the heart of the island, the place where the creature's seal was originally placed." John couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. "And we're supposed to restore it." She nodded, her eyes distant. "The creature, the one that has been sealed away for millennia. It feeds off the energy of this island. It is trapped, but its hunger is endless. It seeks to break free, to destroy everything in its path. We must stop it from breaking the seal, or everything will be lost." John swallowed hard, the weight of their mission pressing against him like an invisible force. The structure before them, old and cracked though it was, seemed to pulse with some dark energy, as if the island itself was alive, watching them. The ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble faintly, as though the island was reacting to their presence. He stepped forward, cautiously approaching the stone edifice. The woman grabbed his arm, her grip tight. "Don't touch it yet," she warned. "There's a powerful force here. If you try to interact with the seal before you understand it fully, it could destroy you." John looked at her, his heart racing. "What are we supposed to do then?" She took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "We need to open the chamber. The creature lies beyond it. But to unlock the seal, you must first prove you are worthy. The island will test you. It has been waiting for someone like you, someone who can understand the bond between us." John frowned. "What bond?" The woman hesitated, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite read. "The bond between us. Between you and the island. Between you and me." He could feel his confusion growing, his mind unable to process her cryptic words. What was she talking about? A bond. What could he, a human, possibly have in common with a place so alien, so ancient? As if sensing his doubt, the woman's voice softened. "You don't understand yet, but you will." She glanced at the structure again, then back at John. "We don't have much time. We need to activate the seal. There's a hidden key that will release it, and you're the only one who can find it." John felt his pulse quicken. "How?" "The answer is within you," she said, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "It's always been within you." Before John could ask her what she meant, the ground beneath them began to shake violently. The once still air began to ripple, as if something deep beneath the island was stirring. The clouds above darkened, and the hum from the distance grew louder, now a deep resonating vibration that seemed to rattle his very bones. "Whatever is in there," John said, his voice tight, "we need to stop it now." The woman nodded gravely. "We will, but only if you accept your role." John could feel the weight of her words. He had come here looking for answers, but now the stakes were far greater than anything he could have imagined. He wasn't just trying to escape this cursed island anymore. Now it was about survival, not just for them, but for the entire world. A strange feeling gripped him then. It was like a subtle awareness creeping into his mind, something ancient and powerful, stirring within him. Was this the bond she spoke of? His instincts were telling him that whatever came next, he wasn't going to be able to do it alone. The earth trembled again, more violently this time, as if something was waking up. The woman pulled him closer to the stone structure, her grip firm but desperate. "We need to move quickly." But as they neared the entrance, a massive crack suddenly split the air. The island, the jungle, the very land itself seemed to cry out in warning. A powerful force surged, and the entrance to the stone structure began to glow, pulsating with a fierce energy. John took a step back, heart racing, but the woman held him steady. "It's starting. It's waking up." And as the structure's glow grew brighter, John realized something terrifying. They weren't just fighting against an island. They were fighting against an ancient evil, a force that had been slumbering for millennia. And now it was awake. The ground beneath their feet rumbled ominously as the stone structure before them seemed to pulse with an eerie glow. The air grew thick with tension, and John's pulse quickened. The woman stood motionless, her eyes locked onto the glowing entrance, her expression unreadable. She had warned him that the island was alive, but now it was clear just how true her words were. This wasn't a natural occurrence. This was something deliberate, something that had been waiting for this moment. John took a cautious step forward, drawn by the strange, magnetic pull of the entrance. The air around him felt charged, as though the very atmosphere was alive with the energy of the island. His breath came out in short bursts, each step seeming heavier than the last. There was no turning back now. The woman's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "Don't," she hissed, her voice sharp and tense. "You're not ready." "Ready for what?" John asked, trying to shake off the overwhelming sense of urgency creeping through him. "What's going to happen?" The woman's eyes flickered toward him, a trace of fear now evident in her gaze. "The island won't let us in unless it's willing to trust you. It's been waiting for you, John. But it's not just about the bond we share. It's about something much bigger, something far more dangerous." John was still struggling to comprehend the enormity of what she was saying. "Why me?" he asked, feeling a strange pressure building inside his chest. "I'm just a man. What could I possibly have in common with this place?" The woman's grip tightened. "It's not just the island, the creature that lies beyond the door. It's ancient, older than anything you can imagine, and it's been waiting for someone like you to set it free. It knows you, John." The idea of being some key player in a centuries-old prophecy or battle seemed absurd to him. He was just an ordinary human, someone who had stumbled across this island by accident. But the fear in the woman's eyes made him reconsider. Whatever this place was, it had plans for him. And whatever was behind that glowing door wasn't just waiting to be released, it was preparing for something far worse. John felt his hands start to tremble as the air grew heavier. The island was alive, and now that it had recognized him, he could feel its influence seeping into his very bones. A sharp, cold energy wrapped around him like chains, tightening with every passing second. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to remain calm. The woman looked at him, her face hardening with resolve. "We fight. But you need to understand, the creature has power over this land, over everything. If we fail, the island will consume us, and everything else will be lost. Forever." John nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about survival, not just for him and the woman, but for the entire world. But even as he nodded, doubts began to cloud his mind. The island was alive, and it wanted him for something. It had called to him. Why? Why now? And why was the woman so sure that he could do what no one else could? Before he could voice his thoughts, the stone doors in front of them began to shift, slowly grinding open as though pushed by some invisible force. The air shimmered with energy, the hum growing louder. The woman's grip on his arm tightened again, her body tense. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. John nodded, his body filled with an intense, inexplicable energy. The closer they got to the entrance, the more the air seemed to crackle with power. Whatever was on the other side was waiting for them, and it was stronger than he had ever imagined. As the doors opened wider, a faint light poured out from the darkness beyond, illuminating the path ahead. It was not a welcoming light, but a cold, unnatural glow, like the eyes of something ancient and hungry. The woman stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "We're not just facing an ancient evil," she said, her voice steady but laced with something John couldn't place. "We're facing the truth, and if we fail here, we will be part of a history that has been buried for centuries. An unspoken curse." John felt the weight of her words like a hammer to his chest. Whatever was on the other side, whatever secrets the island held, it was clear that this was no ordinary mission. This was a battle for the survival of not just the island, but for the balance of the world itself. With a final glance at the woman, John stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. As he crossed the threshold of the door, the world around him seemed to hold its breath. The moment he crossed over the threshold, a loud, thunderous roar erupted from deep within the island. It was as though the earth itself screamed in agony. The doors slammed shut behind them, sealing their fate. John and the woman were now inside, trapped in the heart of the island. And whatever lay ahead would change everything.